So I recently checked out Gladiator 2 and, well, it's what I expected, but it's also not. Now, it seems audiences are liking this movie in general, but everybody can unanimously agree that it falls well short of the first Gladiator. And I definitely agree with that. But the issues that this film has sticks out in a big way, and to be honest, were completely avoidable issues. Now, when I first heard they were doing a Gladiator sequel, my first thought was basically synonymous with literally everyone. Why? Well, I thought going to watch Gladiator 2 would answer that question. After all, I asked myself the same question when I heard we were getting a Top Gun sequel, and then Maverick came along and showed me very quickly why, and it was great. But having seen Gladiator 2, my question remains, why? Why does this movie exist? Now, this isn't a bad movie. I want to make that very clear. I can see the appeal and I understand if you enjoyed it, but I think it just could have been so much more. Gladiator 2 is an extremely lazy sequel, one that attempts to ride the coattails of its far superior predecessor almost beat for beat, but at the same time fails to recapture the entire point of the first Gladiator movie. If you forget that Gladiator 2 is a Gladiator sequel, you could probably be forgiven for thinking that this is a well above average swords and sandals action movie, but the problem is Gladiator 2 doesn't let you forget that it's a Gladiator sequel. And that's why I can't bury my head in the sand with this movie. If you want to almost copy the first movie beat for beat, then you will be compared to it, and that's where this movie falls apart. Now, before we get into Gladiator 2 and why it's such a lazy sequel, we do have a sponsor on this video. This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. So as a YouTuber, I have to take my online security very seriously, and with Surfshark VPN, I can definitely have some strong peace of mind. We live in a world where we're constantly online, so it's important that we protect ourselves when we are. Surfshark VPN can keep your presence and valuable information secure and private with just a click of a button, keeping you safe from hackers, viruses, and all other nasties threatening your privacy. And if you live in a country where, let's say, the Netflix catalog absolutely sucks, Supernatural is on US Netflix, but it's not on Australian Netflix. Yes, I know, I watch Supernatural, it's my comfort show, just leave me alone. But with Surfshark, I can change my location to the US, and boom, I can hear Jensen Ackles say Sam every 5 minutes. You can also protect unlimited devices too, so you can truly cover all bases. You can also get data breach alerts, which notifies you the moment your email, credit card, or other personal information is leaked online for extra peace of mind that all of your information is safe. Now, you can pick up Surfshark VPN for yourself using the link in the description down below, and there is also a 30-day money-back guarantee, so no stress. And you can get your first 4 months for free using that link below. So check it out, and thank you to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. Now, I don't think it's any mystery or even a controversial thing to say that Ridley Scott has lost his mojo. I mean, did we all watch Napoleon? Now, I do want to be clear, Ridley Scott has delivered some of the greatest films ever. Alien, Blade Runner, Gladiator. Dude knows what he's doing, at least he used to. But after Prometheus and especially Napoleon, I wasn't exactly full of confidence when I heard he'd be coming back to do a Gladiator sequel, and I think I was definitely right to feel that way. Now, it must be said, if you pretend the first Gladiator never existed, then I'm sure you can find some solid enjoyment out of this movie, and I'll no doubt have droves of comments on this video complaining about the fact that I'm comparing the two so heavily. But like I said in the intro, when you make a legacy sequel and you try and go almost beat for beat with the original, the comparisons are more than justified. And it's those comparisons that really do highlight best why this movie never even stood a chance of passing the original. Which, if that is not the goal, why even bother making the movie? Why dig up a franchise 24 years later if you can't make it better? It's like Ridley Scott saw how Top Gun Maverick surpassed the original and was like, yeah, I can do that too. Let's get this thing in development right now. And whilst he didn't fail to a spectacular degree, as this is, again, not necessarily a bad movie, it's just a poor recreation of what is a far superior movie. Now, in order to understand why Gladiator 2 is one of the laziest and most pointless attempts at a legacy sequel I've seen in quite some time, again, despite not being awful, we first need to understand what made the first Gladiator a Best Picture winning classic. The first Gladiator is a gritty, raw story about revenge, taking us on a journey of a strong, morally righteous man who stands up to corruption and goes on a revenge quest. It was shot in a way that truly transported you back to ancient Rome. The cameras used were older, giving the film a grainier and more weathered look. It's a raw and unpolished looking movie by design, and it looks like a movie made decades earlier than it was. Now, I'm going to reference some excellent points brought up by fellow YouTuber Johnny Law, who brought up how the first film embraces masculinity and Gladiator II abandons it. Check his video out if you haven't already, because he goes way further in on the topic than I will. But he talks about how the first film is unapologetically masculine and that Maximus's story is so heavily ingrained in the roots of male nature that a man will do absolutely anything, even die, to save, avenge, and protect his family and honor. Also, the camaraderie of men and male relationships and how strong it can be. This is all so deeply ingrained into why so many people love the first Gladiator. It's why it worked. When you think of a manly movie, you think of a movie like Gladiator, but unfortunately, embracing masculinity in 2024 is basically the equivalent of being a criminal, because man equals bad now. So when a movie comes in the modern day that's a sequel to a movie that had unapologetic masculinity so deeply ingrained in its DNA, well, I guess you can see where this is going. Here's the thing though, Gladiator 2 doesn't entirely abandon the masculine roots of the first movie. It does try to replicate them in some areas because they clearly understand how important it was. But because of its half-assed approach at embracing something so deeply intrinsic in the first movie, it stands out even more as a core issue. It tries to swing for the macho bravado of the first Gladiator, but also tries just as hard to abandon it, giving it a complete identity crisis. They try to bring about that manly camaraderie with some hazing of Lucius, our main character, after he kills a CGI monkey by doing monkey sounds when he sits down to eat his food. We also have friendships grow within the ranks of the gladiators that you could deem exclusively masculine, but at the same time, the movie is quick to betray that and shoot characters down as frail and stupid. Like, the film starts with this animation intro which showcases the only female gladiator from the first movie who was pretty much unnamed and had nothing to do with anything. And I think you might know where this is going just based off that alone, but the thing is, it kind of doesn't. Let me explain. Lucius's wife is also a soldier now, because the wife living on the farm is an issue in the modern day, despite it completely betraying the time the film is set and also betraying what the first film established. The thing is though, all women in this film are basically incompetent. Everyone is, really. The wife is a soldier now because 2024, but she couldn't hit the side of a barn with her arrows and then she just dies. So it's like, okay, so what are we actually doing? The film tries to abandon masculinity because masculinity bad and puts women in a place of competence and power, but it also abandons that just as quick, leaving me to wonder, what were they even going for here? Like, you can't actually even call this movie woke, and I hate that word, it is just so overused. But this movie tries to go for that angle initially, but then abandons it after it's already affected the story. So was Ridley Scott trying to smash the patriarchy by making women incompetent?
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Like, it doesn't make sense. It just makes both men and women look bad. This is what I mean when I say this film has a complete identity crisis. Nothing really makes sense with what it's trying to say. What is Gladiator 2 trying to say? I honestly have no idea. The reason I bring any of this up is because this does directly affect the story. This entire issue ties back to the idea of revenge being a major part of the first Gladiator movie. The reason we got behind Maximus so quickly is because we can tell he's a good man. Commodus murders his own father, and when Maximus doesn't allow the corruption to stand, Commodus orders for Maximus's innocent wife and child to die, meaning that this man who stood up for what is right paid the price of his family because Commodus is a corrupt piece of shit. It makes it so easy for us to get on board the revenge path with Maximus, to really get behind our main character. Gladiator 2 rides the coattails of the first movie by doing something similar, but it does it worse in almost every way. Let me explain. In Gladiator 2, the revenge path is as follows. Lucius and his wife are fighting in a battle in which they're fighting against Acacius and the Romans. She tries and fails miserably to kill several soldiers and Acacius himself, so he orders the archers next to him to fire in her direction and she dies, thus setting the revenge quest for this movie. Now, why is this a problem? This is a problem because we've gone from an innocent wife and child being murdered because Maximus stood up for what is right, to a soldier getting killed on the battlefield by an unnamed archer taking the orders of the man standing next to him after the wife tried to kill him. To say this is a downgrade would be an understatement. The reason they did this though is because it's not Acacius that's bad, he's merely the one doing the evil twin emperor's bidding and he actually hates war. Which, okay, but is that worth any stakes and the investment of the audience in the main character for a revenge quest in a Gladiator movie? No. Now again, I don't entirely hate what they did with Pedro Pascal's character here, but in the context of a Gladiator movie, this doesn't work. Because you tiptoe around anything bad he'd do on the battlefield because you want to keep him redeemable, but that doesn't work when we're setting up a revenge quest, because Acacius drives the revenge plot of this movie, but he doesn't really do anything wrong. Commodus drives the revenge plot for the first movie, and he does a lot wrong. That's why it worked. We as viewers can't really get behind Lucius because, to be honest, there's nothing even close to what Commodus does in the first movie here. There's nothing for us to really latch onto. We don't really understand who he is as a character in this process as well, which is a whole other issue. There's nothing for us to really get behind because they wanted to keep Pedro Pascal's character redeemable, which means the very foundations of the movie are brittle at best. It feels like they were afraid to actually just have another despicable bad guy to set the revenge quest up. Like, if she was an innocent farmhand and Acacius went out of his way after the battle was won to slaughter her in the village, let's say, of course we're going to be right on board with the journey of revenge. But because they wanted to make the wife a soldier because 2024, and they wanted to keep Pascal's character redeemable, her death carries barely any weight at all, which is the complete opposite to the first movie. And when you're trying so hard to ride the coattails of the first movie and follow it beat for beat, it doesn't line up, it doesn't match, it doesn't make sense. But let's stray away from that for a little bit, because the rest of the movie is also a bit of a mixed bag with a lot of issues. The Gladiator fight scenes in this movie are honestly great and offer a better visual spectacle to the original. However, spectacle was never really the point of those fight scenes. We've gone from two dudes duking it out, maybe with a tiger mixed in here or there, to straight up naval battles in the Colosseum with sharks and 5-foot CGI monkeys. Not to mention, Gladiator II drops the visual style of the first movie, which is honestly one of my biggest issues with it. Because in the process, it just ends up looking like a generic Hollywood blockbuster. We spoke about the look and feel of the first Gladiator earlier, and they basically did away with that completely. They traded in style for spectacle, and I don't think this was the best decision personally. This film has a very digital look. Instead of an emphasis on practical effects that help ground the world, there is an over-reliance on modern technology that betrays the style of the first film. Instead of practical tigers, we have an entire fight focused on CGI monkeys. It doesn't feel like it belongs in the world established by the first movie. Same goes for the sharks in the Colosseum. Pardon the pun, but this movie does jump the shark big time with this kind of stuff. Now, apparently they could flood the Colosseum back in the day, so I'm not going to say that that's the issue, but sharks? Yeah, I don't know about that one. And again, it comes back to the point of, yeah, if this wasn't a Gladiator sequel, then this might work. This might feel normal, but when you go from the first movie to this, it's incredibly jarring. Now, there is also some really strange dialogue in this movie. The first movie is so insanely quotable, it's not even funny, and the best lines in this movie were either copying the first movie or were unironically funny. The dialogue here is just weird and out of place, and most of it does come from Denzel Washington's character. Now, I love Denzel Washington, who the hell doesn't? But I think he was poorly directed here or just wasn't reined back. He was the only one who seemed to have read the script, saw the issues and thought, oh well, I'm just going to have some fun, say some weird shit, deliver my lines in a way that seems out of place because I'm Denzel Washington. Why not? Like, he has a line in this movie where he finishes the word by saying politics. Yeah, I don't know. It's really weird. Not to mention, Denzel is basically the villain of this movie. It's one of the ways this movie did actually stray from its predecessor, but I just don't think it really worked. We end on an anticlimactic fight with Denzel and Pascal's characters, and there's no tension in the fight at all because it's plot armor Gladiator versus 70-year-old man who hasn't thrown a punch all movie. Like, I wonder who's gonna win. At least in the first movie, you knew that Maximus was injured, which added more to the final fight and to a degree even the odds. But here, there's nothing like that. It was just an anticlimactic fight that ended the only way it could have ended. The only fight with any emotional stakes really was between Lucius and Acacius, but it happens just over halfway through the movie because they tried to make Acacius a partial Maximus ripoff, and they just kill him halfway through the movie. There are just some really strange choices in this movie, man. Like, it's a weird one as a big fan of the first film. Now, it's also worth noting the twin emperors are also overplayed to the point of parody. They were entertaining, I'll give them that, but sometimes it feels like they weren't given a whole lot of direction and were just told to be sadistic and over the top. I like the actors, but I just don't think they were directed well by Scott or even written well as characters, to be honest. But like, how did they become emperors? How did their ascension work? Because they're crazy. How did they end up in that position? We don't know. The movie doesn't tell us. They just ended up feeling like caricatures, bland caricatures, and when you compare that to Commodus, it's just night and day difference. Now, on the topic of performances, I think Pedro Pascal just kind of went through the motions, and I love Pedro Pascal, man. Oberyn Martell supremacy for life, but his performance here was kind of flat. Now, a lot of people are blaming Paul Mescal for why this movie didn't really work for them, and to be honest, I think he was terribly miscast. His performance is okay, but he is clearly out of his depth in this role and doesn't even come close to Russell Crowe. So all of this just kind of adds to why I say if this movie wasn't a Gladiator sequel, then it would probably be a decent sword and sandals movie. But again, when you're constantly reminding people that this is a Gladiator sequel and essentially copying it beat for beat, I can't just let it go and pretend that this is some disconnected swords and sandals movie. Look, Gladiator 2 doesn't disgrace itself or anything. I'm merely just trying to hold it to the standards of the first movie because of how reliant this movie is on its predecessor in almost every essence of its creation. And unfortunately, it doesn't work as well as it should and just comes off as a lazy attempt at a legacy sequel. This is a decent sword and sandals movie, make no mistake, but this is a bad Gladiator sequel.